Listen closely, because this is not just about relationships, it's about human growth, transformation, and power. When you go no contact with someone who's avoidant, it doesn't mean they're sitting there unaffected, cold, or unbothered. That's the illusion, the truth. Silence hurts them more than you think. Why? Because no contact strips away the one thing they rely on: control. When the dynamic changes, when you remove your presence, suddenly the power they thought they had begins to dissolve. An avoidant pushes love away not because they don't want it, but because deep down they're terrified of needing it. Vulnerability scares them, intimacy feels dangerous. But when you cut the cord, when you hold your boundary, they're forced to sit with the very feelings they've been running from: emptiness, regret, the quiet voice inside that whispers, "I miss them, I need them, I can't ignore this anymore." No contact doesn't just affect you, it transforms them. It's a mirror that reflects their patterns, their fears, their wounds. At first, they may pretend nothing's wrong, but over time, the silence speaks louder than any words. It cracks the walls they've built, and it forces them to confront the truth. Their strategy of distance doesn't protect them, it isolates them. Avoidants fear vulnerability because vulnerability feels like losing control. And for someone who has built their entire emotional survival system on control, that's terrifying. Imagine carrying years of programming that told you love is dangerous, intimacy is risky, and opening up is the fastest route to being hurt. That belief system doesn't develop out of nowhere. It often comes from early experiences where closeness was met with inconsistency, rejection, or even abandonment. So the avoidant learns, if I keep people at arm's length, I can protect myself. On the surface, it looks like strength, independence, or detachment, but deep inside, it's a defense mechanism, a shield against pain. Vulnerability is scary because it means allowing someone to see behind that shield, to touch the raw, unhealed places, and that exposure feels unbearable. When an avoidant gets close to someone, they start to feel a battle inside. On one side, there's the natural human desire for connection, love, and intimacy. On the other side, there's a voice that screams, "Don't get too close. Don't depend on anyone. You'll get hurt." That internal tug-of-war often leads them to pull away right when things get meaningful. And the irony, that pulling away doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care so much that it terrifies them. Vulnerability feels like stepping into a storm without an umbrella, like standing on a cliff without a harness. It's not that they can't feel. It's that feeling deeply exposes them to the risk of loss, rejection, or shame. Now, here's the critical piece. Just because someone fears vulnerability doesn't mean they don't crave it. At the deepest level, avoidants long for the same intimacy as everyone else. The difference is that intimacy activates their deepest wounds. It's like someone who's starving but afraid to eat because they've been poisoned before. Vulnerability is the food their soul needs, but it's also the very thing they've taught themselves to avoid. And when you understand this, you stop mislabeling avoidance as coldness or lack of care. It's fear wrapped in armor, disguised as distance. But here's where no contact shifts everything. When you step back, when you stop chasing, when you stop filling the space for them, the avoidant is left alone with that fear. And something interesting happens. Without distraction, without someone else reaching in to bridge the gap, they're forced to face themselves. They realize that the walls they've built for protection have also become their prison. The very thing they thought kept them safe is what keeps them isolated, and vulnerability, the thing they've avoided their whole lives, becomes the key to freedom. Think about this. Every meaningful connection in life requires vulnerability. Friendship, love, family, even leadership, they all demand openness. You can't receive love if your heart is locked. You can't give love if you're always hiding. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's courage. It's the willingness to be seen, to be heard, to be known, even when there's no guarantee of safety. And for the avoidant, learning this truth is the turning point. No contact doesn't just hurt them, it teaches them. It reveals that the cost of avoiding vulnerability is higher than the risk of embracing it. So, if you've ever wondered why vulnerability feels like a battlefield for some, now you know. It's not about you. It's about the war inside them. A war between fear and desire, between protection and connection, between past pain and future possibility. And the ones who face that war, who choose to lean into vulnerability instead of running from it, are the ones who discover the deepest form of strength. Because real power doesn't come from walls, it comes from the courage to let them fall. No contact breaks the illusion of control for the avoidant, and that's one of the most powerful truths to understand. Control is the lifeline of someone who struggles with avoidance. They believe that if they can dictate the pace of closeness, the terms of interaction, or the limits of emotional intimacy, then they can stay safe. They don't want to feel like someone else holds power over their peace of mind, so they build a system where distance equals safety. When they can pull away, shut down, or retreat into silence, they feel like they've won. But that's not real power, it's an illusion, and no contact is what shatters it. When you step away and cut off communication, the avoidant is suddenly confronted with a reality they didn't plan for. Their strategy of keeping the upper hand by controlling emotional distance no longer works. Silence isn't something they chose. It's something you created. That shift unsettles them because it takes away the comfort of predictability. For once, they're not the one dictating the rhythm of the relationship. They're not the one deciding how much contact exists. And in that loss of control, their deepest insecurities are activated. At first, they may try to act like it doesn't matter. They might convince themselves that this silence is fine, that they're strong enough, independent enough, and unaffected enough to live without your presence. But underneath the surface, cracks start to appear. That silence they didn't choose begins to echo louder than any words. The longer it lasts, the more they realize they don't control this dynamic anymore, and that realization terrifies them. It forces them to confront the truth that their distance strategy doesn't protect them from pain, it amplifies it. No contact is so powerful because it flips the script. Instead of the avoidant controlling when they open up, when they pull back, and how close they allow someone, they are faced with a boundary they cannot move. They cannot negotiate with silence. They cannot manipulate absence. And in that space, they come face to face with their own patterns. They see that avoidance isn't freedom, it's a cage, one that leaves them cut off from the very love and connection they secretly crave. This is where growth has the potential to begin, because when an avoidant loses control, they start to see the truth. The people around them will not endlessly wait, endlessly chase, or endlessly accommodate their fear. The illusion collapses and reality takes its place. If they want connection, they can't just run from it or try to manage it from a distance. They have to step into vulnerability, into openness, into the risk of being seen. No contact becomes the teacher, the mirror that reveals that control was never real power. Real power comes from authenticity, from choosing connection over fear, from recognizing that love cannot be managed. It has to be experienced fully. So when no contact enters the picture, it isn't just silence. It's a wake-up call. It's the collapse of a false sense of safety that forces the avoidant to ask themselves, what am I really afraid of? What am I really losing by keeping walls up? And how much longer can I live this way? That's the breaking point, the moment where some begin the journey of transformation. Because in the loss of control, they discover a deeper truth. The only way to truly feel safe in love is not through distance, but through the courage to open up and let someone in. Silence creates inner turmoil for the avoidant in ways most people don't realize. On the surface, they may look calm, detached, even relieved when contact stops. They may give the impression that they're unaffected, that the distance feels normal or even preferred. But the truth is, silence has a way of digging past defenses and stirring emotions they've spent years avoiding. The absence of words, of presence, of connection forces them into a space where they can't distract themselves with control, logic, or withdrawal. It's in the silence that the mind gets loud and what they've buried begins to surface. At first, the avoidant may feel a strange comfort. Their protective instinct tells them, good, this is what you wanted, space, distance, safety. But as days stretch into weeks, that safety begins to feel like emptiness. The silence that once felt like relief turns into a reminder of loss. Every time they check their phone and see no message, every time they sit in a moment where connection used to exist, they are reminded of what's missing. And that reminder isn't neutral. It hurts. It chips away at the belief that they don't need closeness, that they don't need love, that they're fine on their own. What silence does is strip away noise. When contact is ongoing, even in conflict, there's interaction, there's energy, there's proof of connection. When contact ends, all that disappears. In its place is emptiness, and emptiness leaves room for reflection. They begin to notice the feelings they tried so hard to avoid: loneliness, regret, sadness, longing. These feelings build slowly, almost like pressure rising in a sealed container. The longer the silence goes on, the harder it becomes to pretend they don't care. The truth starts breaking through the walls they built. This inner turmoil often feels unfamiliar to the avoidant because they've trained themselves to suppress it. They're used to pushing feelings down, distracting themselves with work, hobbies, or independence. But no contact doesn't give them something external to focus on. It's just quiet, and quiet has a way of amplifying the very emotions they're afraid of. That's why silence can feel more painful than conflict. In conflict, they can hide behind defensiveness. In silence, they face themselves with no escape. Over time, this turmoil forces realizations. They begin to ask questions they've avoided for years. Why does this feel so heavy? Why do I care if I told myself I didn't? Why can't I stop thinking about what I lost? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're also a pathway to growth. The pain of silence teaches them that their emotions are not gone, just buried. It shows them that their coping mechanisms might protect them from immediate fear, but leave them vulnerable to long-term emptiness. And here's the paradox. The very silence that hurts them is also the silence that can heal them. Because in that turmoil, they're given an opportunity they rarely embrace: self-awareness. They begin to see that shutting down isn't strength, that distance isn't peace, and that love isn't something you can mute without consequences. The turmoil is not a punishment, it's a wake-up call. It's life's way of saying, pay attention. The feelings you avoid are the same feelings that can free you if you face them. So while it may look like nothing is happening on the outside, silence is doing deep work on the inside. It's stirring emotions, breaking illusions, and revealing truths that avoidants tried to hide. That's why no contact is never easy for the avoidant. It forces them into a storm they cannot control, a storm of their own emotions. And though it's painful, it's also the beginning of change, because turmoil is not the end. It's the beginning of transformation. Avoidants process late, not never, and this truth is often misunderstood. When someone steps back, when no contact begins, an avoidant doesn't always react right away. To the outside world, it can seem as if they're unbothered, as if the distance means nothing, as if the relationship never truly mattered to them. But what's happening beneath the surface is more complex. Their emotions are not absent, they are delayed. Unlike those who feel everything immediately and openly, avoidants push emotions down until the silence grows too heavy to ignore. And when it finally breaks through, it can hit them with surprising force. At the beginning of no contact, they may appear calm, logical, even detached. They may tell themselves stories like, "This is fine, I needed this space, I didn't want that closeness anyway." It's not that they don't care, it's that caring is uncomfortable, so they repress it. Their mind becomes their shield, rationalizing and intellectualizing feelings so they don't have to deal with them. But emotions are not erased just because they're avoided. They sit quietly, waiting, building in strength until they demand attention. And when the avoidant can no longer push them away, they begin to process, just much later than expected. This delayed reaction often confuses those who love them. Someone might think, if they cared, they would have reached out already. If they felt the loss, they would show it now. But avoidants are wired differently. They often don't feel the true weight of loss until the silence stretches long enough to dissolve their defenses. By the time others have begun to accept and move forward, the avoidant may just be starting to feel the depth of what they let slip away. It's not a lack of emotion, it's a late awakening to what those emotions mean. The painful irony is that avoidants often realize the importance of a relationship only when it's gone. In the quiet, without someone there to chase them or fill the space, they begin to notice the absence. They notice the way their days feel emptier, the way the laughter or comfort they once dismissed now echoes in their memory. It takes time for them to connect those dots because their instinct is to run from discomfort. But when there's no one there to buffer that discomfort, when no contact leaves them face to face with emptiness, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Processing late doesn't mean they don't feel deeply. It means they've built such strong walls that the feelings take longer to break through. And when they finally do, they often come with intensity. Regret, longing, sadness, and even love can flood in all at once, overwhelming the avoidant who thought they had everything under control. This is why no contact is such a powerful shift. It interrupts the cycle of pushing emotions aside and forces them to surface in their own time. Understanding this timing helps to reframe the way we see avoidance. Their silence isn't proof of indifference, and their delay isn't proof of a lack of care. It's simply the way their defense system operates. They need more time, more silence, more space before their emotions catch up. And when they do, the realization can be both painful and transformative. Because in processing late, they learn a critical truth. Avoidance doesn't erase feelings, it only postpones them. And the longer they delay, the heavier those feelings become when they finally arrive. Growth happens in discomfort, and this principle is at the heart of why no contact can become such a transformative experience for the avoidant. For most of their lives, avoidants have run from pain by creating distance, by pushing people away, by hiding behind independence and control. Discomfort feels threatening to them, so their instinct is to avoid it at all costs. But when someone establishes no contact, the avoidant loses the familiar escape routes. They can no longer use another person's pursuit, reassurance, or presence to manage their fear of closeness. Instead, they are left sitting in the very discomfort they've been running from. And while that may feel unbearable at first, it is also where the possibility of change begins. Discomfort strips away illusions. When there is no contact, the avoidant is faced with a mirror that reflects their patterns clearly. They can no longer pretend that distance solves everything because the silence starts to feel heavy and suffocating. It exposes the truth they've worked so hard to ignore, that avoiding emotions doesn't make them disappear, it only buries them alive. The discomfort forces them to sit with loneliness, with regret, with the painful realization that their strategies are not protecting them from hurt, but are isolating them from love. And though this stage is incredibly challenging, it is also the spark that can ignite awareness. It is in the moments of unease, of emptiness, of silence that growth takes root. Human beings rarely change when life feels comfortable. We change when life forces us to confront what isn't working. For the avoidant, this discomfort begins to unravel old beliefs like "I don't need anyone" or "closeness is dangerous." The pain of isolation becomes greater than the fear of intimacy. That shift is the opening, the place where growth starts to take form. Because discomfort has a way of teaching lessons that comfort never can. Growth doesn't mean the avoidant suddenly becomes open, expressive, and vulnerable overnight. It means that they start to recognize the cost of their avoidance. It means they begin to see that independence without connection feels empty, that control without closeness feels cold, that safety without love feels lonely. Discomfort forces them to realize that the walls they thought were protecting them are actually suffocating them. And that realization can be the beginning of real healing. The beauty of discomfort is that it pushes people beyond their limits. For the avoidant, sitting with the silence may be the first time they've truly confronted their inner fears without distraction. It may be the first time they've allowed themselves to feel the full weight of what they've lost or the emptiness of living behind walls. And even though it hurts, that hurt is the birthplace of growth. Just like muscles grow when they're stretched and stressed, the human heart grows when it faces discomfort and learns how to expand instead of contract. So while no contact may feel like a punishment to the avoidant, in reality, it's a gift of growth. It is life presenting them with an opportunity to evolve, to break free from the cycle of avoidance, to discover that discomfort isn't a threat, it's a teacher. And if they lean into that lesson, if they allow the silence to speak and the pain to guide them, they can transform. They can learn that real strength doesn't come from avoiding discomfort, but from facing it and rising stronger because of it. Growth is never found in the easy moments. It's born in the struggle, in the tension, in the discomfort that forces change. And for the avoidant, that discomfort is the doorway to a new way of living, loving, and connecting. Healing is possible, and this is the truth that often gets overlooked when we talk about avoidant attachment. It's easy to see the patterns of withdrawal, the silence, the walls, and assume that change will never happen. It's tempting to believe that someone who has avoided vulnerability their whole life is incapable of transformation. But that belief misses something important. Human beings are wired for growth, and no one is permanently locked into their patterns. Avoidants may move slowly, they may resist, they may struggle with fear, but given the right conditions and the willingness to confront themselves, healing is absolutely within reach. Healing begins with awareness. For the avoidant, no contact often becomes the catalyst that wakes them up to the cost of their behavior. When the silence grows heavy and the absence becomes undeniable, they start to realize that their strategies of protection are actually keeping them trapped. That recognition is painful, but pain is often the doorway to healing. They begin to see that avoiding connection doesn't make the need for love go away. It simply makes the longing more intense and the emptiness more obvious. Awareness turns into the first crack in the armor, the first moment of truth where they understand that something has to change. The next stage of healing involves courage, the courage to face vulnerability. This is the step that feels like climbing a mountain with no guarantee of safety. For someone who has avoided openness for years, choosing to let another person see them feels terrifying. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. Healing comes when the avoidant learns that opening up won't destroy them, but will actually free them. It comes when they allow themselves to take small risks in connection, to share a piece of themselves, to test the waters of intimacy and discover that they can survive it. Each step of vulnerability builds resilience, showing them that love is not a threat but a source of strength. Healing is also about rewriting old stories. Avoidants often carry narratives from the past. I can only rely on myself. If I get close, I'll get hurt. Needing someone makes me weak. These stories are deeply ingrained, but they are not permanent. Through self-reflection, therapy, or simply lived experience, they can be rewritten into new truths. I can trust myself and still let others in. Closeness brings fulfillment, not just risk. Strength is found in both independence and connection. Rewriting these narratives takes time, but every step forward weakens the hold of avoidance and strengthens the capacity for love. Perhaps the most powerful part of healing is the recognition that connection is not optional for a fulfilling life. Human beings are wired to bond, to love, to be seen and understood. The avoidant may resist this truth, but in the end, they cannot escape it. Healing is possible when they finally embrace that their longing for connection is not a weakness to be hidden, but a natural, beautiful part of being human. The very thing they once fear, intimacy, becomes the key to their freedom. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it transforms the future. It doesn't mean the avoidant never feels fear again, but it means fear no longer controls them. It means they learn how to balance independence with closeness, self-protection with openness, boundaries with love. It means they can step into relationships not as someone hiding behind walls, but as someone willing to be seen, willing to give, and willing to receive. So yes, healing is possible. It's not quick, it's not easy, and it requires discomfort, honesty, and persistence. But it is real, and when an avoidant begins that journey, they not only free themselves from the chains of fear, They also unlock the ability to experience love, connection, and fulfillment in ways they never imagined. Healing is not just a possibility, it's a promise waiting on the other side of courage,